Hi guys, welcome back. This is Matt Chat episode 151, featuring the second and final installment of my interview with Retrogaming radio host Shaynar Monroe. In this part of the interview, we talk more about piracy, emulation, and abandonware, retrogaming. We also talk about the Amiga platform and Kickstarter. A lot of great stuff, so without further ado, here is Mr. Shaynar Monroe. So if you were in charge of Sony's Vita system, you know the design of that, would you have gone with the, what their solution was, a proprietary cartridge, I suppose, of some sort? Would you have rather gone, or if you had the option to do a Steam-like online registration system, I mean, what would you have done for that system?
Well, I wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, well, okay. Probably the people that did make it would have rather worked on something else, but
probably. Well, let me just give you my basic thought process on that piece of it, right? I believe that Sony have a belief that the best of the best of the best tech is the best, right? Now, you and I have lived through how many generations of gaming? What, we're up 7 generations, 8th gen now? How many times, just how many times has the best technology in a video game system actually won, right? Look at the Atari Lynx. Look at the Sega Nomad. Look at TurboGrafx 16. Look at these handhelds. Okay, Game.com. Okay, that was just a total, well, I don't even know what they were thinking. But if you look at it, if you look at all of the Amiga computer, why are we not streaming on an Amiga computer right now? That thing was 15, 20, yeah. What, you got Skype on that thing?
I thought we stole the technology and called it a,
and we called it Windows.
Microsoft product.
Unbelievable. Well, I guess my point is that the best never wins. It's the people that have the purse strings. It's the people that make dancing silhouette advertisements. It's the people that somehow, advertising. There's a great movie. If you've not seen this movie, and I recommend this to all your listeners, it's R. So make sure you're 18 or talk to your parents. Doing my community part. It's called Roger Dodger. Fantastic little indie movie. Probably cost like $5 to make this movie. And in this, the guy works as an advertising agent. His job is to, and he tells you what his job is. His nephew comes to visit, and his nephew's like, Bodunk nowhere town, right? So he doesn't even know the big scary city. And so he goes to see his uncle, and he asks his uncle, well, what do you do? And he says, I make people feel bad. He says, well, I thought you were in advertising. That's exactly right. I make people feel bad. He's like, I don't get it. He says, well, that's what advertising is. You have to make people feel that there is something missing from their life. And he goes on to this whole big deal. And I'm sitting there going, this could be like the most brilliant movie like ever made. And they do this a couple of different times with different topics, but we won't go into that. But there's a couple of different times when he just goes and he just spews out this stuff. And you're going, it's like you have this epiphany. He basically talks about how men will be subservient slaves to women, within 100 years. And the logic piece that he goes with this is absolutely brilliant. But the fact that he comes forward and he says, the point of advertising is to make you feel bad. And I started watching ads. I started seeing, and he's right. Why is everything sexually based, right? Because everybody feels they're sexually repressed. So it's like, oh, see, how come that guy gets that girl, that hot girl on there? How come he gets them, but I don't? That guy's probably gay, and he's getting that girl. How come I'm not getting the girl? He's like, well, you're not drinking, Seagram's wine coolers. That's why you're not.
They don't have Retrogaming podcasts.
Right, they don't have Retrogaming podcasts. So what's that about? But I found it interesting that, and that tails right back to, who knew what the Amiga was? Now, the Commodore 64, you lived through the era of the Commodore 64. At Christmas time in 1982, 83, I'd have to look it up. You literally sat there and flipped the channels between Commodore ads. It was like the Commodore 64 computer is multimedia. And you could just click through the channels, and it's like every time you flip the channel, there's a Commodore commercial. And that's why there was like one Commodore 64 in every 3 homes in the United States or something crazy like that. 12 years later, they still sold 90,000 units. It's like, wow, that's crazy. And then the Amiga came along, which should have just wiped up the floor with everybody. And it's like, what's the Amiga? It's like there's no TV ad, there's no ads in Compute magazine, there's nothing. And it's like, well, this is the greatest technology of all. You want to get on this mountain and scream, hey, look at this thing. It's 4,096 color stereo sound. And everyone's like, don't care. Ooh,
Well,
Apple.
I've heard, some people I've talked to have suggested that what killed the Amiga and the Atari ST, for that matter, was the piracy.
There was probably a generous amount of that going on as well. But again, let's talk about numbers, right? If you have a million people, we'll just round these numbers off. You have 1 million people that own a product. If 10% pirate, help me out with the number here, 100,000?
You're talking to the wrong guy.
Yeah, too. My wife's around here somewhere. She could tell me what 10% of a million is. But if you have 10% of a million, and those are the only people that are pirating, right? 10%, 90% of the people are paying. If you have 500,000 people and 10% of those people are pirating, now it's a bigger deal, right? So if the Amiga would have had a bigger user base, then they would not have had such an impact with the piracy. So, and again, that was, it's sort of a catch-22 until you have that momentum and you have that many people going on, those sort of numbers. It's just like, Apple or Android or anything else. They've got, Android's got like 500 million 500 million handsets and tablets running around. If 10% of those guys are pirating, nobody's feeling the effects of that. On the Amiga, of course, they just didn't have those kind of numbers. So does that mean it's true that piracy killed it? Maybe. I think Commodore had a really big hand in putting that thing in the ground, to be honest with you. And we could probably talk about that for like 10 hours. I could tell you exactly why the Amiga failed because I was there at the end. I actually got to watch them put the last nail in the Amiga coffin in real life, in person. And that's a great story. I could tell you that sometime. But that was just bad decision making. Commodore had some very greedy executives and they made billions of dollars off the 64 and they took all the money and they just shoved it in their pocket. And when the Amiga came along, they're like, we don't need any more money. We're good. But it goes on from there. So did piracy kill it? Who knows? There was definitely a good share of it going on, though. But so was it on the Commodore 64, right? As you would know from your friends who Commodore 64 software, there was no end to pirated Commodore 64 software. It was falling out of people's pants pockets at school, literally. But didn't affect the Commodore 64 at all. They had one in every 4 homes. So.
Right, and I think the Commodore 64, there was a lot of productivity software for that too. I remember my grandmother used it for a tax, like she filed tax returns with it.
Sure.
I just felt like the Amiga, if it just could have had a little bit more productivity. They had the video toaster. But I think, one of the problems is the people that really loved the Amiga and really were into the games were also the savviest ones, when it came to, hey, how can I get, free games?
Well, you're stumbling upon a completely new topic, which is the user base and their connectivity. People say that Apple, despite having fewer phones now in the market, is still making more money for developers than Android is. And I'm not trying to say that every Android user is a genius and every Apple user is a bonehead. I'm saying that I feel that the people who end up choosing Android do so because of the freedom and what it offers to them, the non-rock wall garden experience. They don't want that at all. They want to play. They want to experiment. And of course, those are the people who are going to see the sort of things that encourage, shall we say, lower cost software. But it's true. Who are you looking at? The IBM PC user that basically goes to work and types in on WordPerfect. He's not nearly as savvy as the guy that's back on his Commodore Amiga, shooting full, gen-locked video in his basement. This guy's nobody. He's shooting music video in his basement with a gen-lock. And yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said for market savvy contributing to that sort of thing. I think it really becomes up to the developers then to how to take advantage of that, right? You've got savvy people. Let's not feed them cut the rope and Angry Birds. Let's just assume that they maybe want something more. And move in that direction and see what happens. A lot of people claim that the only reason they're not on Android is because it sucks for audio work. A lot of people, and there's validity behind this. I've done some research, but there are people that say I have to have an iPhone or an iPad because this music software is not on Android, and there's a reason because there's a technical limitation. Totally get that, right? And people tend to use at home what they have at work, right? And there's a lot of companies that are moving from Blackberries now to iPhones. You see iPads being bought by the U.S. Air Force. So it really is it's a complicated market, and I don't know where I was going with that either, but we got totally segue. What was our original topic again?
Well, to bring us back, I've often suspected, maybe cynically, that blaming poor sales on piracy is kind of the refuge of a bad game. you know, like
Sure.
Duke Nukem Forever would have been a number one, bestseller, huge hit, but all the pirates, they prevented its success. Uh, I mean, what do you make of that?
Oh, well, here's the deal. And it comes down to two things. What you just said, of course, is absolutely true. When something goes bad, you don't blame yourself or the product. You blame, oh, it's the economy. The economy's really low. Despite the fact that people are out buying $700 iPad 3s right now, they couldn't afford a $299 product, and that's why we went under. Okay, whatever. But it also comes down to actual doing business. As I understand it, I'm not a businessman. I'm not an accountant. But as I understand it, there's some way you can write this off, that you can actually hedge your losses through claiming some sort of loss to piracy. I don't even know if I'm sure there's a lawyer somewhere that can make that work, a business lawyer or a tax lawyer that can make that work. So I think in the cases of the big companies, the EAs and the Activisions, sure, I think that there's some way they can actually post losses and get tax breaks because of piracy. So that's why it becomes this huge. We lost $1 billion to piracy of Call of Duty. Yeah, well, you made $900 billion on Call of Duty. So I'm not sure that I'm crying over the poor showing of your product when you sold 900 billion copies of Modern Warfare 3.
Yeah, I wanted to also talk a little bit about the abandonware, and how that's different than just getting a copy of Modern Warfare 3, let's say.
Right.
I think some people would probably say there's absolutely no difference. If you didn't pay for that game, you are a pirate, you are a criminal. But even a lot of the developers I've talked to have said, we don't care, because otherwise nobody would ever heard of us. We'd rather some
Right.
people be playing our games.
Please
So where do
copy
you
our.
come down on that?
Well, and again, it comes down to semantics, right? It's still piracy. You copying your personal Blu-ray you purchased to make a DVD for your personal consumption is illegal. Just like I could take a cartridge, I could buy a Super Nintendo cartridge, get that new Retrocade or whatever it is, that little plug-in device, and drop the ROM onto a USB drive. I just committed piracy. So again, I guess it comes down to what your conscience is. Now, does the FBI care if you're copying your Blu-ray disc and moving it to DVD so you can put it in your car? I would hope not. It's still technically illegal. If you're playing a 1977 arcade game made by somebody who doesn't even exist anymore without having paid for it or without compense to the original IP owner, it's piracy. There's no way to cut it. But they try to somehow say, well, that's okay. We under the abandonware moniker, download this, but you have to delete it in 24 hours. That's my favorite of all time. You can
What?
play this ROM, but only for 48 hours, and you have to get rid of it. Otherwise, you're illegal. Yeah, whatever. It's like you said. It's some sort of way of saying, well, I'm making myself feel better. You're still illegal. It's still punishable by 5 years in prison and $50,000 fine if you're caught playing freaking, I don't know, Donkey Kong Game and Watch Simulation. It's absolutely crazy. Personally, again, for me, it goes down to who's actually being harmed by what you're doing. For me, it's about damages, and I think that's the way it should be. Litigiously, is about damages. Can you prove? I watch Judge Judy religiously with my wife, and Judge Judy will tell it like it is, and she's like, "Sir, you sustained no damage." Well, I lost work, and I had to stay home, and I had all these grievances. She goes, "You have no damages. Go dismissed." And that's really what we're talking about: is where's the damage? Who's being harmed? Now, Nintendo has a perfect right to come in and say, "Listen, you cannot distribute Donkey Kong .rom. You just can't. It's our property. We have viable. We can turn around and sell that game right now on the eShop and make $5 a hit for it. It's a viable property." I don't like it. I don't like the fact that I can't play Donkey Kong the arcade game from 1980 or 1982. I can't play that legally because they haven't provided it for me on the eShop. I can't buy that ROM legally anywhere for play on a system that I currently own. So that's frustrating. They have to understand, these IP owners have to understand, you can't sit there and pull the rugs out from under us without giving us an option. We want to pay. For God's sakes, we want to give you our money. Please, please let us buy a Donkey Kong ROM. No. Well, to set up that infrastructure would take too much money and time, and we don't want to do that. So we're just going to grill you for the $49.99, same collection as last year, gaming set, and then but we're not going to throw on Donkey Kong. We're going to give you Mappy and Rally X 17 times in a row. So I think it's a combination, right? I think there's a combination of the IP holders need to understand they're not providing what people want. If they were, then people would be paying for it. iTunes is still in business. Don't ask me how. When you can literally Google Lady Gaga. What's a Lady Gaga song? Google Lady Gaga, whatever. Paparazzi. Google Lady, and within 2 seconds you can have a download link and you have an MP3 file sitting right there. You can do that, and anybody can do that. You don't have to have some elite Usenet hookup or be on Pirate Bay or have a torrent software. You can do that right now. I guarantee you. You should probably do that in the background. See if you can find that paparazzi.
Look for the Weird Al parody, maybe.
Yeah, the Weird Al parody would be better. No, but seriously, so if we want to play this stuff, either cut us loose and let us do it, which is the nice thing to do. I think that's good PR, but what do I know? Or give us what we want. Let us play it the way we want. We want to play it. We want to play it on the Nintendo 3DS. Let us play it on the Nintendo 3DS. Structure is not the right time. Whatever. So don't be surprised when someone goes and pirates it. You've got Diablo 3 coming out, right? Diablo 3, single player game, no online anything, but you're gonna have to be online to play it because they want to sit there and watch and make sure you're not playing a pirated copy the whole time. They just lost a sale. I will not buy Diablo 3. I've been waiting for Diablo 3. How long? Has it been 10 years? I mean, there's not a month that goes by, but I don't think, man, I can't wait to play another Diablo game. I could care less now. They've totally ruined the experience for me. I do not want somebody sitting there reading my hard drive while I'm trying to play a single player solo campaign. It makes no sense. When they say, oh, we need to protect you from cheaters. We need to protect you from people running hacks. That's legit. I mean, I've heard of this stuff.
Punkbuster and all that stuff.
Right? I mean, that's legit. I get that. If I'm playing online with other people, there is a decorum you must conform to. And that goes back to this whole identity thing that we're arguing about on Google Plus and all these other things about, Google wants your real name. They want you to be you. I agree with that. But when you're not in a public decorum, you should be able to run around in your underwear with your pants over your head in the privacy of your own home and do whatever the hell you want, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. But these guys aren't even giving you that option. They want to sit there and keep you on a leash. I think that's out of line. I think that's going too far in the name of anti-piracy. And that's the same thing that Sony claims. That's why they put these proprietary memory cards out. Well, if we put it out on regular SD, then they would hack it. Well, dude, they're going to hack it anyway. But instead, you're going to have to charge $50 a game now because you chose to use this medium.
Yeah, for me, I mean, that kind of stuff really offends my soul.
It offends your soul? That's
well,
pretty good.
I feel like they, I'm trying to pay them money. I'm a fan of their product, and instead of welcoming me and treating me with respect, I'm being submitted to the equivalent of a full body cavity search
every time you play.
Every time I play, I mean, that's a terrible way to do business.
Oh, and then as you mentioned earlier, the used game market, all that stuff that's going down. They charge you extra to play online. We could talk for an hour on the whole used game market. And in fact, on my next Retrogaming Radio show, watch as I shamelessly plug my show. On my next Retrogaming Radio, we're going to talk about how curtailing used game sales actually harms the retro gamer. And I think that's a topic that's well overdue to be discussed in our area, in our circles. But people don't understand the significant ramifications of what curtailing or eliminating the used game market will cause. It's a horrible thing. I've actually written it out in steps, and I've made a flow chart of what this equals when you start removing used game sales, and not just removing them in the way of discouragement like they're doing now. Well, if you want to play online, it's an extra $10 because we know you saved $10 at GameStop when you bought this thing. No, they're talking about building it into the hardware. Xbox talking about, Microsoft talking about, well, this won't even run used games. Well, how the hell are you going to pull that off? And what does that mean? I mean, that'd be like saying you can't give your old shoes away to Goodwill. You can't loan a book to your friend. You can't, wow, the implications of what that means and what precedents that sets. Unbelievable. And to me, that's that borders on, Marxism, if you will. It's absolutely crazy.
It reminds me of those, the seeds? They have the built-in Terminator gene in them. Have you heard about this? I mean, if that doesn't creep you out, there's something wrong with you, There's
and people are just
sinister stuff.
It is sinister, and that's a great word, by the way. It's a perfect word for what's going on here. It's something that's not just, people call Google evil or Apple evil. Sinister's a better word because every company is looking to make money. Every politician's looking to get their pockets lined. Everybody's evil, but Sinister's different. Sinister is not just lining your pockets, but that's screwing somebody else out of money too. And I'm watching things like the Skylanders. You're familiar with the Skylanders, these little characters
Yeah, I actually interviewed the guys that made this.
Really?
Paul Reich.
Oh,
And
really? I got
Fred
that one I
Ford.
have to go back and listen to. He's huge. So everyone understands the concept of these little things. This is a communal thing, and I think it's great. I think it's fantastic that you're not your characters aren't tied to a profile. You don't have to haul your hard drive to your friend's house in order to play something you paid for. You can actually put these guys in your pocket. Nintendo totally dropped the ball with the Wii on that one. They did that. They built into their little controller. They built memory in there that could hold stuff, and they totally dropped the ball with that. They could have done exactly what we're talking about here. You could take this little guy and you could feed it your character, take it to your friend's house, and boom, you're on with your character. No internet required. Um, eh, that's innovation, and that's something that's really cool. But they really want to hold that down. Server side storage of your characters because we don't want you hacking them. I think that process that they're going through, that they're looking to dissolve, is absolutely crazy. It's sinister. That's the best word to describe it. Is sinister.
Well, if you don't want to subscribe to the Sinister media, I mean, we do have alternatives now. This Kickstarter stuff. The Tim Schafer and his Double Fine Adventures, and now you've probably heard Brian Fargo is coming out with Wasteland 2, through this. So,
I did.
This you don't even have to worry about pirates, right? Because you get paid up front.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's like the greatest thing ever. And I think I talked about that on my last Retro Gaming Radio show. Once again, a shameless plug. I talked
plug
about
away.
that.
It's required listening.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I talked about that at great length, and usually with Bits and Bytes, that's the segment I cover news. Usually I discuss briefly and I move on, but this really hit home. I probably spent 20 minutes talking about that. I love the concept. You're paid up front. The Tim Schafer thing just blew me away. They were looking for what, 400 grand? That was what they were. That's
very modest starting out.
Very modest money. They ended up with $2 million, and they still had 30 days or something to go on the whole process.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Unbelievable. And let's be honest. Okay, the guy's done solid work, right? Day of the Tentacle, Fandango, Grim Fandango, things that people love.
You could stop with Day of the Tentacle, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. I mean, too, right? But now you say Day of the Tentacle in a room of 100 people, you might get 1 or 2 bites, right? That's not exactly what I would call. That's not David Crane territory. Let's put it that way. You say David Crane, like half the people in the room will probably know who you're talking about. Now, if David Crane said, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start this Kickstarter. I need $1 million because I'm going to bring back real Pitfall, not this Mine Adventure crap. I'm going to bring back real Pitfall. You won't believe what I've got in store for you. I mean, I think you could sit and watch the website and the money would just continue up. I think it's a brilliant idea. Now, of course, there's the dark side of that, right? And I mentioned this on the show too. You still got to get paid. I mean, do they actually have the money in hand at that point, or are those pledges? I don't know the details of that. But how do you get paid? What's the conversion factor of pledged versus have?
Yeah, how does that work? I'm not really sure how that.
I'm not sure either. But every time I watch like the Jerry Lewis telethon, which I don't watch, but I flip past, and it's like, wow, this thing's still on. It's like, okay, so the guy's got like this $60 million thing at the top. What does that actually, at the end of the day, what does that actually translate into actual money? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I love the concept. I love the idea that you're giving people what they want. You can't compete anymore. Software gaming is really a third world country. You got the people at the bottom, these little indie developers that are clawing their way to trying to claw themselves out. They're trying to just make a living doing it. They live in 1-bedroom studio apartments. I know several of these small independent developers. They've got families, they got a wife and a kid, and they are actually saying, listen, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to do this full time. And you're not going to have known any of these games that these people put out. And then you've got the EAs and the Activisions, and there's really nobody in between. There's no moderate success. It's either you got it or you don't. And I think this is great. I think this really helps level the playing field. And that's what we need to do as a society, is to help the visionaries, because you know how EA is, man. EA used to be it. Everything they put out was gold. Dr. J, Larry Bird, One-on-One, Archon,
Archon, yeah.
Legacy of the Ancients, you name it.
Adventure
EA
construction set, yeah.
Adventure, the construction set series, racing destruction set. EA, if you were to talk to anybody who grew up in our era, EA was it. They were like, anything they put out, you bought it immediately. You didn't even look at the box. You ordered, well, you had to order online, and it wasn't, or order, you had to mail order it. You couldn't just, order from Amazon. You actually had to pay in advance. You sent the check in the mail, and 6 weeks later, you got the game. Old school. You guys don't know how good you have it now. But when EA announced a game like 3 or 4 months in advance in a magazine, and they showed you actual game graphics, not the box, but they showed you actual game graphics, and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. EA was it. Now look at EA. Nobody wants to, no one has anything fun to say about EA. They become this giant evil conglomerate. They make their workers work through Christmas, and
EA spouse and all that stuff.
Yeah, EA spouse, right? I mean, there's tons of literature on the topic. So it changes, right? Activision on the Atari 2600, Activision was it. When Activision came out with the game, it was gold, right out of the box. You didn't even have to put it in to know how much fun you were going to have. Now, who's Activision now? Activision's Call of Duty. That's their thing, and it's not the same deal. And again, I think I've talked myself into a corner because I don't remember where we started that piece. You're the host. You're supposed to.
Yeah, we could. We should be wrapping up here. But
yeah.
I was just thinking about Tim Schafer, and you mentioned David Crane. I mean, these are big names, or at least to some people. Some people would they hear Brian Fargo and he's making a game. They're, hey, I got it. My checkbooks. Here's my checkbook. But what the new guys that nobody's ever heard of. The new David Crane. The 16, 17-year-old David Crane out there, he's not going to be able to use a Kickstarter, and he's not going to be able to get a job with EA or Activision. So what?
There's no branding for him. He has nothing to work with. It's sad. It's sad. But there's a new trend. Maybe, I know we're running out of time here. There's a trend now with music where up and coming artists tag themselves with somebody who's established, and this is like a new thing. And I had to have somebody explain it to me. It's like so and so featuring Lady Gaga, and you're like, who the hell is that, and why is Lady Gaga with him? And it's like blah 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 featuring Jay-Z. And I'm sitting there going, well, why would these guys even bother to associate with these people? Well, it's all part of the deal, right? You've got these new up and comers, nobody's heard of them, nobody cares, but if you put Lady Gaga next to them, people will care. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need apprenticeships or journeymen in software development. Maybe we need David Crane to go out and get that 16-year-old kid and say, listen, I'm going to bring you in. I'm going to teach you all my secrets. It's going to be like those old movies where it's like the old samurai is about, the old samurai is about to kick the bucket. I must teach you what I know before I go, that sort of thing. Let David Crane, get one of these kids and help him out. Shane Monroe featuring David Crane. I could sell tons of software with that. But I think that's an interesting thing that I think that Kickstarter, that project could open that up. I don't know. Maybe there's all sorts of uses for it. I think it's great.
Well, just to finish up here, Shane, is there anything that you want to plug or send a website to send people to, or anything like that?
No, not really. Retrogaming Radio is pretty much my primary focus these days. We put on a monthly show. We've been doing it since 1998. We had a couple-year hiatus when I felt that I had done what I could do with the show, and I wanted it to kind of go out while it was still popular. I don't want to be one of those guys like, God, is he still recording that crap? Jeez. But I wanted to go out while the show was still popular, and I said, I'm missing some passion here. I'm missing what makes the show great. I don't want to go out badly, so we took a couple years off. But now the show is back. We've got new technology, cool stuff, stuff that no one's doing yet, which is exactly how Retrogaming Radio started. We started doing, some people even credit us with the podcast. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but if you look at the numbers,
the first podcast I ever listened to. I mean, you didn't call it a podcast back then. I don't even think we had that term back.
There wasn't a term until Apple came along and coined that and managed to steal that too. It was an internet radio show. I thought that made the best medium. Everyone was running blogs. No, they weren't even called blogs then. They were called news sites. And then I said, I communicate better with my voice. I think that I should try that. I think that's a good delivering medium. And, come on, we didn't have Real Player yet. That's just how far back this goes. But yeah, so once I kind of had the passion drop off, we took that break and we came back with all this good stuff. And the show's, I don't think the show's ever been better. And the best part about retro is it shifts. When you say classic, you say 20 years ago, or from a point. You know, when you say classic gaming, you say 1982, 1983, 1984. Retro gaming's different. You know, as soon as we shift to the next generation, there's another generation that becomes retro. So now I've got more stuff to talk about. I can talk about the Dreamcast without people going, "No, that's not retro." Well, yeah, it is retro. I'm sorry to say. So Retro Gaming Radio, I do run a social commentary podcast, as you mentioned earlier, called Passenger Seat Radio, which I do about once a week, which is really a data dump of my life and what's going on. I talk about social issues. These are some of the things you and I have talked about right now. It gets graphic at points because life is graphic. That to me, that's sort of what it is. And I credit Howard Stern for really inventing this format. He's the one who said, "I'm just going to go on the air and talk about who I am and what I'm doing," and it changed everything, right? I mean, whether you like the guy or you don't like the guy, you can't argue with his success. And I said, well, if you're going to be honest, if you're going to start talking about stuff, you can't hold anything back. I just passed a stupid kidney stone. 6 weeks it took me, and every single step of the way, I covered it on the show. And even the actual passing and retrieval, I also shared with my listeners because I don't think you can really you can't hold back on that. That's what people have a weird, creepy sense of humor when you think about it, or a sense of curiosity. So yeah, so that's the other thing that I do, and of course I have various endeavors, and I spend a lot of time on Google Plus. But those are the two things that I think would be best for people in our arena to listen to.
All right, Shane. Well, thanks a whole lot. It's been great fun.
No, thank you. This is absolutely fantastic. I don't have to take this video and do anything in post with it. I don't have to recode it. I don't have to edit it. It's fantastic. I get to put my headphones down and do nothing after this. It's great. I love doing this.
And that's all for this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Should be back next week with a new retrospective. And as always, I'd really appreciate you guys giving me some good suggestions for games that you'd like to see me cover on the show. Been doing some newer games lately, Diablo 3 and Terra. So if you might cover those. Or I could go back and look at something with a bit more of a pedigree, such as Wing Commander, Lands of Lore, something along those lines. So just let me know what you'd like to see. I'm also open to adventure games, Beneath the Still Sky perhaps, or Day of the Tentacle, game that gets brought up quite often on the show. So just let me know what you think. I'm happy to consider anything and really appreciate your input. Also, of course, really appreciate your donations. So if you like the show, want to see more episodes, then please go to armchairarcade.com and put a few dollars into the Bard's hat. All right, now let's get to that most important part of the show, the Ale of the Week. Now, the Ale of the Week is another Telegraph. This is from another one from Herbert. Thanks again, Herbert. This is Reserve Wheat Ale, brewed in Santa Barbara, California by Telegraph. It is not for the faint of heart. It says here, this special brew is available in extremely limited quantities, and apparently it is brewed with lemon verbena, or verbena, however the hell you pronounce that. It's supposed to be an intensely sour, wild ale, recalling the earliest rustic beers. So it's must be really something special here. Maybe we should quit reading the label and actually open this up and give it a taste. There you go. Let's see how this is going to work. Whoa! That was fun. Maybe next time I'll actually hit the target. All right, let's pour some of this in the old, rather excellent drinking horn. Ah, smells good already. Definitely smell that wheat. I don't know if you've ever had a wheat ale, but if you're one of these people that thinks that you hate beer, and the only thing you've ever tried is something like a Budweiser, I recommend that you try a wheat. And actually, a lot of people I know who hate other kinds of beer will very much enjoy a wheat ale. Blue Moon's probably one of the most common. But anyway, let's give this one a smell. Very citrusy. I could almost imagine this was a Mountain Dew, let's say. Well, let's give it a taste. Oh, that is quite yummy. Kind of like what is that? Kind of like an apple juice, kind of a taste there. Very citrusy too. Very flavorful, actually. Very nice. Very crisp, I would say. Refreshing. Very delicious stuff. I'm going to very much enjoy polishing off this bottle. Thanks again to you, Herbert. Cheers. All right, let's finish this up with a quotation. And this is not a quotation per se, but just a thought that I had. It goes something like this: history is the exception to the rule. See you guys next week.
Well, this is me. You know, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. Death to all but metal.
No, it's not death to all but metal. It's death to all but metal.
Yeah, but metal.
No, not but metal. It's death to all but metal.
But metal.
But no but. There's nothing about a but. Death to all but metal.
That's what I said.